Hello, welcome to Get Your Mind On. I'm Lori Stohs. We're going to talk about the second dimension of the strengths that we have started last week. Last week we covered executing. Remember, there's 4 dimensions: executing, influencing, relationship building, and thinking. So today we're going to talk about influencing. So when you think about influencing, we think about how do we move people forward? How do we get people excited? How do we get people to take action? How do we carry that flag to get people on board with our ideas? Now, some of you may be saying, oh yeah, that's me. I love to do that. And others may say, yeah, that's not me. I like to be the one that I'm kind of behind the scenes following. I'm not always the one carrying the flag and able to kind of bring people together to kind of work towards a cause. So whatever that might be, when we think about influencing, there's different types of influencing. So some people, when we think about influencing, are really influencing with action. They're really moving forward, and they're ones that just get things started. You're sitting in the meeting and they're like, okay, let's go. How do we go do this? They don't always have the plan for it, but they get people excited about it and say, we need to get started with it. There's those who are competitive. Those competitive people like to win. They're the ones that like victory. They're the ones that say, how do we do this? And you think about teams, and they're the ones who are, fighting for the cause to say, we need to be number one. And then there's those of us who have maximizer, which maximizers really around excellence, quality, fine-tuning. How do we take good to great to world class? And how do we just become the best at what we are good at? And really focusing on quality. They're able to pick out things that are just that little tiny thing to make it better. They are able to really fine-tune things. And then we have people really who have that confidence theme, that self-assurance that you just know they're calm in the storm. They're able to show up and they're able to be calm in that storm when there's those things there. And there's those who maybe have a little bit of command and like to be in charge. So there's lots of different things. There's also woo, which is winning others over. Those are the people who can talk to anybody at any point in time. Those great marketers, those great people who talk to strangers every day because that really inspires them to connect with people. So there's lots of different ways to influence when we look at the StrengthsFinder themes. And really, when you think about that influence piece, that's probably a smaller audience of people have that influencing talent. Those of us who have it, if you have a lot of influencing, sometimes it can look aggressive, sometimes it can look pushy, sometimes it can look like, wow, they're just like taking control and command. That is what it does. But we really have to think about how do we manage that. If you are one that has influencing, and you have to look at that and say, how aggressive can it become? How much does it look like me? How much does it look like the team? That is one thing to really think about when you're thinking about how to influence others and getting them on board, is being able to manage that, just like any strengths. But if you have an intensity, I've had some people who have 4 of their 5 strengths in influencing, and they are pushing and charging all the time. And some people, if they don't have that and it's not very high for them, they feel like they're being run over. Although, depending on what else is with it, it can feel very inspirational and very group, bringing the group together and leading them forward. For those of you who don't have influencing, I'll have some teams or individuals who don't have it and say, how do I influence others? You might influence in a different way. Some of you influence through your thinking, that you might have some great ideas. You might have some great ways to think about the vision, think about where we're heading, think about different ways of getting there. And so you influence people by sitting and having a conversation through a thought, which is a little different way to influence. Again, influencing is that push and drive a little bit more, where this is still getting people on board with your ideas, but it's more through thought process. Some of you, maybe people do things for you because they have a great relationship with you, right? They know that you're kind of surrounding them and you're able to get them there, but it's not as much of a push and drive. One instance of that might be in a sales situation. I have a number of sales organizations that I work with in sales teams, and I may have 2 people sitting there, and one person gets there a little bit more aggressively. One person maybe has a more of a relationship type. They'll get there, but it'll take a little bit longer because they're not going to be as pushy about it. I had a group last week, we were talking, and one lady had a great relationship piece, great executing, she had high responsibility, but that influencing piece wasn't hers. Well, what that looked like then is she forgot. She would have the person, this is a phone sale, she would have them on the phone and have, check in with them, see how everything's going. She was always consistent, always delivered, had a great relationship, but she forgot to ask. She would forget to ask for the sale. And so just by helping her understand how she needed to go about it, she could become more successful because that natural influencing wasn't there. Now, if you're managing influencers, if you're an influencer and managing influencers, sometimes there's a little bit of aggression and a little bit of head-to-head that goes on, not in a bad way, but just knowing that there could be a little bit of that because you're both trying to influence, depending on those boundaries that you create with each other. Otherwise, if you have people who are not influencing, you really, again, have to look at the role and look at what they're doing and how much time they're spending in influencing. Because if you have expectations or if you see that sales are not getting to the point that they need to be, maybe that influencing piece is something not as natural to them. And so if that's the case, and you look at their whole 34 strengths and you find groupings of influencing at the bottom, you definitely have to take a look at that to see if that's a best place for them to be, or really maybe reposition them in something more of account management versus maybe that whole sales role. So there's many different ways to look at that. You really have to look at the person overall as a whole, but if influence is a big part of it, you need to understand how to manage that. So for positive charge, 1, think about, do you influence? Do you need to influence in your role? I think is a good question. 2, if so, who do you use to influence and help you with that? And number 3, in managing others, how can you be aware of what influencing talent they need in their role? So we know every day in our lives we're influencing, but some of us influence in a different way. If you have a responsibility to bring people forward and get people on board and kind of take the charge and carry the flag forward, that influencing talent is really important. For those of you who are kind of secondary influencers, you know you have partners to do that. Find your partners because we know when we do have influence, we do move things forward in a positive manner. Thanks for joining us today, and remember to get your mind on.